Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, January 31st, 2022. It's the last day of January. We're already through one of the months of 2022. How do you like that? It came and went like that. Whatever that is. I don't know. We always say that it came and went like that, although it's very frequently accompanied with a snap. I guess that's true. But in written language, which this isn't, you would say it came and went just like that, and people would be left wondering why in my day, they taught in school what that was. But these days, these kids, who knows what sort of instruction they're getting. They're dropping everything from the curriculum now. All somebody has to do is say that snapping is CRT, and it's gone. So I guess that's it. So teach your kids. Teach your children well. Okay, well, anyway, that guy's probably banned from Spotify anyway. Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. We have that. And it occurs to me as I say that this show might be on Spotify. I don't know. I mean, I forget. When you sign up with Libsyn, they make it easy to get your podcast out on, well, any of the major platforms. And it's just a matter of, today we signed a deal with such and such a company. And click here if you want your stuff to be carried there. Sure, I do. Absolutely. Why not? You never know who's going to find it there. Now I know who's going to find it there, and maybe I don't want to be there. I should double check that. Although, does it matter? I mean, I suppose. I'm not making any money for Spotify, I assume, but I guess we should all leave. I don't know. In order for them to make the least amount of money possible, I will take my 1 cent or fraction of a cent and go elsewhere with it, I guess. I don't know. I'll have to go and look and see whether I even signed up for it. That's how much I care about Spotify, I guess. But big controversy over the weekend. Rightly so, because, of course, well, it happened before the weekend. Musicians, including now, I don't know, let's see, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, a few others, big names, in earlier times, bigger names, I guess, pulling their music from Spotify because Spotify not only hosts and, I guess, disseminates because it's such a bad stuff. The Joe Rogan podcast, which I've never actually listened to, but very popular. That wouldn't change anything for me, but in terms of listening to it, who's got time for things like that? Who listens to podcasts? Anyway, I've never. It's not my kind of show, not your kind of show. Probably none of us have ever really sat down and listened to a whole show. Anyway, I'm sure it's all very entertaining or whatever, but of course, filled these days with COVID misinformation, and Neil Young, the first one to take this brave stance and say, listen, you can't have both my music and Joe Rogan on the same channel or same platform. None of this COVID misinformation has to go. You can't be profiting off of that and also taking in who knows what off of hosting my music. And artists, one after the other, are joining. It's unfortunate, too. You find out there are a lot of other people. I happen to see David Crosby on Twitter being asked the same question. Well, are you going to do what Neil Young did? And he said, I would, but I don't actually control the rights to my music, which is an unfortunate byproduct of the music industry these days. And it has been for a long time, and artists don't always control their catalogs. But I guess those in control of their catalogs, if you can figure out who they are, might be encouraged to do the same. But yeah, I was reminded, I had seen this in passing. I don't track what happens with Joe Rogan, but I was reminded that it isn't just a situation where, well, Spotify, hosts both the music and sells both the music of Neil Young and the Joe Rogan podcast. They signed some sort of exclusive deal with Joe Rogan in order to get the rights to hosting his podcast. And I don't know if it's exclusive to Spotify. I can't imagine. I don't know whether they can even do that with podcasts these days. But at any rate, it was a big sponsorship deal. Like, they paid him, I think $100 million was the figure I saw bandied about in order to move his podcast there. So it's a huge or it's supposed to be a huge profit center for them. Anyway, I don't know whether it ever profits them anything. I don't know how you make money with that, quite honestly. But it's a big showcase deal for them, is what the point is. And so it's pretty accurate for you to say, Spotify is investing an enormous amount of money in disseminating COVID misinformation, and they really can't have it that way. And I suppose to any extent that you can remove revenue from their pockets, you ought to do it. They lost a tremendous amount of market value over the weekend as their share price dropped, and you should consider doing what you can to make it continue dropping. I don't even know what they do to make money, honestly. The idea, they don't create anything. They're just letting you stream other people's creativity, and I don't understand how that has billions of dollars in market value, but you know how these things are these days. And if you don't, maybe Greg does. And if Greg doesn't, someone else probably does. And they'll call us and tell us. But Greg's here, so let's get started. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. It's interesting that you picked Joe Rogan to talk about, because I was going to talk about Joe Rogan, too.
Oh, well, all right, then. I don't know. Everybody was talking about him this weekend, and I thought it was important. I thought what I really wanted to get around to was reminding everybody they paid him like several million, like maybe $100 million in this deal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
so
you can't
back
get around
in the day, when they first, started, I was a Spotify subscriber, and I recently quit and told them it was because of Joe Rogan.
All right.
And I have listened to his podcast, so I want to talk about that too.
Oh, okay.
But let's start with Variety
clips
here. Spotify lost more than $2 billion in market value after Neil Young pulled his music over Joe Rogan's podcast, and this shares of Spotify falling 6%. Over the same time period, the tech-heavy NASDAQ rose 1.7%, so it's not like the entire market dropped, just Spotify.
Well, all right,
Now,
that's targeted. Good.
Back in the day, if you wanted to listen to music on the internets,
yes,
you could go to Apple and you could go to iTunes and you could download a song for $1.99 or 99 cents or whatever it was.
Yes, this is about
and you
as
did that,
far
and then
as
you
I
got tired of paying. And if it turned out that you wanted to listen to something maybe only once because you just felt like it, but you didn't really want to buy the song, if you subscribe to a place like Spotify, you could go listen to that song and, satisfy your craving and then forget about that song for the next 10 years. And that basically was the Spotify business plan.
Okay, that's not helpful.
Part of the problem with that is, as Neil Young noted when he quit, is I hate Spotify because they screw up the music. The sound is terrible. All the other services just do a better job streaming now because technology has passed Spotify by. Plus, you have the issue like Bob Dylan selling his catalog, I guess, to Sony for $1 gazillion. So Dylan wouldn't be in the position to pull his music because Sony owns it now.
Right.
So, there's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. At the same time, just in terms of sheer numbers, according to an article in the San Francisco Chronicle, Neil Young gets about 6 million hits a month for his music on Spotify.
Okay.
And Joe Rogan gets 11 million hits per show.
All right. So you see what Spotify's going to do.
So that's the background for all of this. So Spotify doesn't make money. And, in fact, this helps them lose even more. Now, you could lose money for a while and then make money. That's what happened to Amazon. I don't know if anybody remembers, but Amazon was a money loser for the first couple of years.
Many.
And everybody kept saying, well, how can they make money? How can they? Well, they did okay.
Yeah, and I don't think I could explain that either. But they do.
But the point is that you make or lose money in the first couple of years isn't a signal or sign, like see Apple, as to what's going to happen to you later on.
Okay.
Right. So, that's part of all the background here. Now, I have listened to Joe Rogan shows.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Rogan is kind of an everyman. He speaks in a normal voice. He speaks in a normal language. You can easily imagine him being a literate, small business owner from Long Island. Easily.
Okay.
Or Staten Island,
Did you mean illiterate or literate? Illiterate. Okay. I was just making sure
a regular guy, and when he interviews people, he basically asks them reasonable questions in a reasonable voice. He's not a shock jock like Imus or Howard Stern used to be. Right? It's just an interview. And so that's the attractiveness. That's the attraction. And so the question is, of course, who he has on, what kind of questions he asks, and who he is allows to speak. So, for example, and this came out, he had a 9-minute apology on Instagram over the weekend, saying, I'm sorry for the controversy. I'm sorry I put Spotify in this situation. I could do better.
Okay.
And he says a lot of interesting things on that 9-minute piece. So if you want to get a sense of Joe Rogan and his style, you could listen to the Instagram piece.
And you don't have Spotify to do it. You can go listen. Okay, Instagram. That was
so I gave
put
him
it on
the link.
Spotify so that people would have to go back and listen. But all right.
And he says a couple of interesting things. One of the things, you'll relate to this. He says, look, guys, I just do a podcast. Yes. And I like to talk to people, and I like to find out information. I like to ask questions. And I don't do a whole lot of preparation for this. And when I get on the show, I'm not really sure what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Okay.
So I heard that. That's at the 5-minute mark. And I said, okay, I can relate to that. I bet David can relate to that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that it took him 5 minutes to getting to it, too.
Right.
Right.
So in the 5 minutes before that, he says some things I wasn't so keen on. For example, he says, what I do is I have people on, and some of them admittedly are controversial. I just want to, find out what's going on here. And people say I'm spreading misinformation. I don't think that's fair, because things that were supposedly misinformation 8 months ago are accepted discussion now, like whether or not masks work. And that sort of skips over the fact that, well, things that work for Alpha don't work for Omicron. So the situation has changed.
Yeah. And
right. So when people were saying then that you shouldn't wear masks and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, that may have been true at the time. It may not be true now. And so it's just not automatic that, okay, that means that we never have to pay any attention to what everybody says. And yet, he justifies the controversial people he has on because he cites their credentials. This guy's published more than anybody else, and that guy helped invent the mRNA vaccine, and I'm just a guy. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But I want to ask them questions. And then he goes on to say, something which is very good. And he says, all right, so maybe I didn't do my homework enough, and maybe I wasn't as well prepared as I should have been to ask the right questions. And when I'm talking about controversial people, maybe I should have an expert who doesn't think that, because clearly this is outside the mainstream, and maybe I do my own scheduling, and maybe I should do better in terms of having like another expert on who does speak for. I just don't want to talk to only the experts who speak for the mainstream. I want to hear from some of the controversial people, which is not unreasonable.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you listen to him and say, okay, well, this is not unreasonable. And he says, and I understand that when I do these controversial things, Spotify has decided that they're going to put a disclaimer that says this doesn't represent mainstream opinion and it's controversial. And I'm okay with that. They can go ahead and label that. I just want to talk to people and find out what they think. And that's okay, too, on the face of it.
I guess.
Right? The problem, again, is it's like the let me be reasonable for the sake of being unreasonable. And that ranges from Susan Collins to Bill Maher. Yeah. And then, if that doesn't work, and then you start drifting into Tucker Carlson territory. And is Joe Rogan any of those people? Well, he's a guy who interviews people who has a very friendly, easy interviewing style, and people like to listen, and that's how he makes his money. And that's where that goes. So I don't want to take him off the air. I'm okay with the disclaimers. I'm all right with him, doing a little bit better in terms of research when specifically you're going to have somebody on who's controversial. You should be asking them a whole lot more questions about, but what you're saying here is completely opposite of what the mainstream is. Why is that? I mean, that's a reasonable question. Mm-hmm. He does some of that, but not enough of it. So, yeah, I mean, he basically said, I didn't do the best job here. I could do a better job, but I still want to have these people on and talk to them because I want to find out what they're saying. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's not okay. It's not okay to give a Nazi a platform.
Not say that. Sometimes it's okay to say that. Sometimes it's okay not to say that.
Well, I don't want to give Nazis a platform just because they're reasonable and they speak well. And I want to interview David Duke, and I'm going to do it, in a style that just allows him to say what he says, because basically I ask questions and they answer, and that's the whole show. I don't think that's all right. And so you got to be a little bit more careful about who you pick. I don't want him to have Andrew Wakefield on.
Okay.
I think that's bad. I think Wakefield is a known crank and a proven liar. All right. So for the idea of, yes, but I want to hear what he thinks, I don't think that does the listeners a service. Having some other people on who may not agree with the mainstream does. So you have to be careful about who you pick and choose. Mm-hmm. And Rogan's not very good at that, but he is very good at the interview. And so that's basically the Joe Rogan story.
Okay. Well, could be reasonable. I don't know. It seems to me, though, his first warning sign that he needed to be more careful was, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I got the impression that there were people out there who were famous and did have platforms. I guess I'm thinking like Aaron Rodgers controversy, and it sort of got into circulation that famous people who were repeating terrible misinformation were saying things like, well, I heard this on Joe Rogan, or I heard this from Joe Rogan, or Joe Rogan says this something, 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 and he became more of an influencer than he was willing to give himself credit for, and I can understand that too, but at some point, if there are controversies and fires going on all around you, several people with fame, influence, and platforms saying, well, yeah, but I got that from Joe Rogan, then you might say, maybe now would be the time to do that homework or post a 9-minute apology on Instagram instead of waiting to get hit in the pocketbook.
But the thing is, those guys really are cranks. I'm not so sure Rogan is. I just don't think that, he realizes what responsibility he has. And at the same time, interestingly, people like Kara Swisher have said, if you watch that 9-minute video from Rogan, he takes more responsibility than Spotify ever did.
Okay. Well, maybe I will watch it and just, I don't know, enjoy him taking responsibility for something. By
the way,
really
he's a Neil Young fan.
Oh, well, good. So that probably made him stop and think. That's a nice thing.
People probably know this because, everybody knows this now, but I didn't know this last week, that both Neil Young and Joni Mitchell had polio when they were kids.
Oh.
That it affects their guitar playing.
I did not know
and they have different styles because of it.
Huh.
Neil Young does a lot of one-note things, for melody, and Joni Mitchell tunes her guitar differently so she can play it easier.
That is interesting. I did not know that. And, all right, well, there's something.
Well, that's one of the reasons they feel so strongly about vaccines.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, I will just tell Joe Rogan, where you went wrong is having people on the show. That's the problem. Don't do it.
I'm laughing because the point about, well, I'm not really sure how we're going to do the show, and it's not like I super over-prepare for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that. I promise you I do.
I get that part. Absolutely. The problem is he then says, well, what I'll do is I'll bring other people on who know what to say or have things to say, and I'll ask them questions. I think you should just talk anyway. That's my view. Don't bring people on the show. Just do the show. Read the news and talk about that. But different style thing. People like to hear other voices. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, well, you just try talking on your show in the first hour and see what happens.
Yeah, I have done it. I try it weekly. And sometimes even reverse the order and have Joan come on second. It doesn't work all that well. That's true. It's a hard thing to do. But, yeah, it's harder. Actually, I find it harder to try deciding to book guests. I feel bad. I wouldn't book a guest because I feel bad. What if I don't get to your subject? That'd be terrible.
All I'm saying is, when you actually do a podcast like David does, you have a little bit more empathy for Joe Rogan and what he's trying to do when he tries to put this thing together. And you appreciate where he's good at because you know how hard it is.
Yeah,
but at the same time, you do have responsibility. Like there's this famous Tucker Carlson piece going around, a little clip saying, I lie. I know I lie. When I get cornered, I lie. I hate that I do that, but I feel like I'm trapped, and so I lie.
Oh.
Well, we don't.
We go, as long as I'm feeling terrible, I might as well just do the whole thing and say, I'm wrong about that.
We say, okay, well, maybe I was wrong about that. We don't just lie so that we're always right. That's the difference between us and Tucker Carlson, besides the fact that we don't have 11 million viewers per podcast,
Yeah, well, that's because we don't lie enough.
So, that's all part and parcel of it. But it's just it's an interesting approach.
That is interesting.
Where do you draw the line between having somebody on at all? Where do you draw the line about I only have them on under certain circumstances? Like I have another, maybe that same show. It's a 2-hour show. Maybe I'll have them on for the first hour and I'll have a true expert on the second hour. Something like that.
Well,
or
yeah.
I'll actually look at the questions I'm asking and make sure at least I get a couple of these in.
I
Like,
did
well,
see,
what about the time where your license was taken away and you were kicked off? What happened there? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, all options for you, Joe. You can think about any one of them. Send us $100 for giving you the great idea. The one clip I did see of his show, I guess recently, was I guess he did have somebody who was something of an expert on, and every time Joe Rogan said, "Yeah," but I heard that the opposite was true. No, you're completely wrong. Look it up, and they would show him the article, and
he would look it up live. That was the thing on that show.
Yeah,
he didn't do the research, so he actually researched it live and said, "Oh, I guess you're right."
Yeah, but it took him a while too. He spent the first 5 minutes of it
until
saying,
the guy made him.
Well, that's fine.
But that's what makes it so intriguing to watch him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting too. I look things up on the air all the time too. But what I saw in the clip was he says, but this is still you're wrong, and he persisted for a good couple of minutes saying, "I'm looking at the proof right here, just like you said, but." Nah, I think you're wrong.
I see the proof, but I'm not going to believe it because I already decided that I'm not. I mean,
that's your problem.
He's a little disingenuous, but I don't have the same antipathy toward Joe Rogan as I do for, let's say, Tucker Carlson, who knows exactly what he's doing and lies about it.
Okay, I think that's fair, and he's certainly doing a worse job about it too. Even if they give him $100 million,
right? Or Bill Maher, for that matter, who was an anti-vaxxer from the very beginning and just found an excuse.
All right. Well, I never liked him. I always thought he was ridiculous. My dad likes to watch his show. I don't understand it.
No, I don't either. But
I'm not going to argue with him.
So anyway, that's one of the reasons. And it'll be interesting to see going forward what happens. Clearly, Spotify is feeling the heat because they know that they got dinged for this if people are dropping the subscription service. That doesn't help them because they're into making money. And they've decided to do the right thing by trying to make sure that people are aware when controversial things are said, which is only happening because people are dropping their subscriptions and their market share is dropping.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit of
that's okay. That's capitalism in action. We're a capitalistic country, and that's how you do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's how change happens, folks.
All right. Yeah. That was so reasonable. I feel like we should get $100 million from some platform. That was great. All right, so I guess you get that money too.
While we're talking about the pandemic, let's finish out the segment, the next 4 minutes.
All right.
This is the American Academy of Pediatrics updating stuff. Today, AAP updated interim pandemic guidance on schools, urging prioritization of in-person learning and adherence to COVID safety measures like vaccines and universal masking. Research shows virus transmission in schools is low, especially when masking policies are enacted. In January alone, more than 2 million kids became infected with COVID during the surge. It's more important than ever to make sure children and school staff wear masks regardless of vaccination status. Now's not the time to let up. Children have suffered in many ways with the rise of mental health issues and deepening chasm of inequities. Learn more about prioritizing children's health at AEP, yada, yada, yada.
You should.
But the idea here is
the show.
That, all you liberal organizations and experts just want to close schools. Well, this is exactly the opposite.
That is weird that there should be proof of the opposite. Huh. Who knew?
Nobody wants to close schools. And in fact, schools are not closing. The only people who close schools are folks who've run out of staff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you run out of staff. And that's because
of the pandemic. It's because of the virus. It's not because of democratic policies.
Yes. And everyone is at pains to remember that very often when places close, it's not because they fired all their staff for failure to meet the vaccine mandates. It's
right.
They're
because they all got sick. So, one of the interesting things is there is a controversy and discussion about whether kids should be masked.
Yes, there is.
Some places do, some places don't. Folks will point out the difference between what happens in those areas is not so great. You can have two communities, who are right next to each other, like Montgomery County in Maryland, I guess it is.
Yes.
And very highly vaccinated and does all the right things and has the same COVID rates as counties next to them that don't mask. And it is complicated. But it also has a lot to do with testing. And you can point out that there's no proof whatsoever that these cloth masks or even surgical masks actually make a difference in schools. And then you can point to other things and say, well, the research actually suggests that it does, but it's not proof. But it's not proof that they don't. And so given the fact that there's things that we know, I saw one of the docs on on Twitter, friends of mine who I like, who don't like masking, were saying, well, it's not proven that it works. And the other guy said, well, it's not proven that it doesn't. Look, if you know that water puts out fires, then you don't say, well, let's stop using water because this particular fire is so big. Just because
no, I wouldn't.
it worked with Delta, but Omicron is so infectious it may not work, so we should stop doing it.
No.
Well, you don't stop using the water. You use the tools you have. It's an airborne illness. These are masks. They help with airborne stuff. If you don't have proof that they work, that's going to take a while. The stuff that's coming out that proves that it works is basically from Delta and other things earlier because it takes a while to correlate and collect the data and then publish it. And by the time they publish stuff on masks and whether or not it helps with Omicron, hopefully the pandemic will be over. So if you're waiting for that before you use your mask, there's no point.
And the pandemic won't be over either. And then, but you'll say, but there was no proof that it was me. Oh, I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know. People who
these are reasonable discussions that reasonable people are having, And so again, that's why the Joe Rogan thing just comes across as being reasonable, and that's why people listen.
Well, I guess
he's asking the questions that other people want to know. What about masks? Let's ask somebody. I don't know about masks. What about masks? I hear so many different things. Let's hear from
I guess
so. There are people that don't even listen to anything.
Yeah.
At least they listen to this. So it's hard to regulate. And what that means is that the onus is on, to a certain extent, people like Joe Rogan to be responsible. Yes. Because places like Spotify aren't going to be. Because they're into it for the money. That's the only reason they're there. They're not. Spotify doesn't exist as a public service.
No, certainly
not. For that matter, neither does Joe Rogan.
I guess that's true. Yeah, I suppose I can sympathize with the idea of not really realizing that you've become such an influencer. But you know what's a great signal for I need to take more responsibility?
Now, a great signal is when the company you work for called and said, you just lost us $2 billion.
Right. Although I was going to say when the check for $100 million shows up, you might take yourself a little more seriously.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Interesting chat over the break. So maybe I'll go and listen to the 9 minutes. And that's going to make it sound like it's a Hitler speech or something. X number of words, X number of minutes. But, yeah, all right. Well, by the way, if anyone wants to send $100 million our way, or even $50 million, we will vet all the information more. I'm guessing that would be our contribution to the deal. I don't know. $100 million check. This was an interesting bit off the air during the break. To me, $100 million is a signal that you need to take yourself seriously and be careful with what you're doing because there's a lot of money at stake. To Joe Rogan, because he's such an everyman, $100 million is, I guess nobody cares what I do. They're just giving money to me, and now I have $100 million. And usually that means I'm a rich guy and I don't have to listen to anybody. So,
well, not just that, but if you write in a complaint, I'm going to say to you, chances are I have $100 million and you don't.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about how I would feel about having $100 million. Probably the first couple days I would feel nervous about it. And then I would feel like, I don't know. So far,
they gave me $100 million, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and not change it all. And then you lose $2 billion, and the people who paid you the $100 million say, "You just lost us $2 billion. You better apologize." And so he does.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
it's pretty straightforward.
I guess that's reasonable enough. All right. Well, I don't know. He should be smarter about things, and don't tell people that you can't.
My
build
favorite
natural
part about
immunity.
this whole so-called controversy
All right. Yes.
is reading Twitter and other responses from people who say things like, "Oh, I can't believe how liberal elites are just losing their mind over Joe Rogan and every man who just asks questions." Usually the people saying that are conservative elites. So I love when conservative elites accuse liberals of being elite. It's just like fun.
Yes.
It's like Barry Weiss talking about education.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, it happens every day. It's their favorite line. And, okay. Well, in the meantime, I would say $100 million or no $100 million. Wear the masks because it makes sense to me that if you breathe out virus or breathe in virus, that having a barrier in front of your breathing hole and having other people do the same makes sense. It's just I'm going back to the old pee in the pants diagram.
Well, the other side of the coin is,
Can't help you.
and by the way, if you listen to Joe Rogan, you'll realize that you should wear a better mask.
Yeah, well, you should. I don't know if you ever get that information from him.
Right, and the fact that vaccination and boosters help you not die
Yes, oh right, that's
isn't
also good basic
controversial. It's
information.
just fact.
Even Long Islanders know that.
Yes.
Why doesn't he just say so and say, I've listened to a number of people, and I have to tell you, the common sense conclusion out of all of this is that you should get vaccinated and wear masks. And well, I don't know when was that part of the show. Did he have part of that show where he said, I've listened now to controversial experts and other kinds of experts and people who are shouldn't be experts but say they are. And after all of this is said and done, I think you should get vaccinated and wear masks and be careful out there. That would have been a reasonable thing to do, but I don't know that ever happened. But I don't listen
speaking
to
of
enough of the
reasonable,
show.
of course, the other big news over the weekend is the continuing work of the January 6th committee and Donald Trump having a rally
Oh, yes, right.
where he, as Ron Fournier puts it, in addition to his follow-up statement, confesses.
Yes, right.
This is a confession, says
Ordered
Ron
the code
Fournier.
red, or confessed to ordering the code red.
Yeah. Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States of America. If the Vice President had absolutely no right to change a presidential election, how come the Democrats and Rhino Republicans like wacky Susan Collins are desperately trying to pass legislation that will not allow the Vice President to change the results of the election? Actually, what they're saying is Pence did have the right to change the outcome, and now they want to take that right away. Unfortunately, he didn't exercise that power. He could have overturned the election.
No.
So in other words, all you people saying that this wasn't a coup and I wasn't trying to take over, let me just explain to you. I was trying to take over and Pence wouldn't let
Yeah,
me.
damn it. Right. Of course, that's easily explained.
That clears everything up, right?
Yeah, in his mind. That feels like a Joe Rogan thing. Well, that's what somebody said that, and we had him on. And I don't know. But, yeah, obviously the real answer to that is no, Mike Pence didn't have that power. And the reason the law is to be changed is when they wrote
Make
the
it clear
law.
to idiots like you.
When we wrote the law, it was a time when everybody knew, A, what it meant, and nobody would ever try to do anything this ridiculous and stupid. But now that we found out that some of you are this ridiculous and stupid, we would like to rewrite the law that specifically says, hello, ridiculous and stupid people. This is not the correct interpretation of the law. We thought everybody would get it, but clearly they don't. You never had the power to do this, and now it will now explicitly say, no, you never have the power to do this. We thought you would understand that from the context, but apparently you have willfully misread this thing. And now we clarify it for those of you who are willfully dumb enough to believe what this guy said.
Well,
Okay.
let me explain it to you in Joe Rogan everyman terms, okay?
Oh.
So there's a famous story, which may be apocryphal, but it's still a good story, about W.C. Fields when he was on his deathbed. Fields, famously irreverent, irreligious, et cetera, et cetera. And a friend visited him and found Fields reading the Bible, which was highly out of character.
All right.
And the friend said to Fields, Bill, what are you doing? And W.C. Fields said, I'm looking for loopholes.
There you go.
This is what people do, okay?
Yes.
And so lawyers get paid a whole lot of money to find those loopholes, and then other lawyers get paid a whole lot of money to fix the loopholes so that the first group of lawyers can go get paid even more money to go find the loopholes again. I mean, this is,
pretty much.
basically civil society. So if that happens, you're going to get a whole bunch of laws when those loopholes get discovered.
Yeah.
Why you need them? Well, normal people wouldn't normally, do that.
Right. There's no loophole either.
Some of the anti-vax people have openly said we introduced conscience clauses into our state vaccine mandates because we wanted a loophole you could drive a truck through.
Yeah. The thing he's talking about, of course, there's a specific kind of, I guess, loophole that Trump in particular specializes in, which is there's no loophole here, really. It's just a matter of the law says I have to do X. Suppose I just say, I'm not gonna. What happens to me? And the loophole, such as it is I don't know exactly. You'd be sentenced to some amount of time in prison, presumably, eventually, if we could get around to it. But there's no sentencing guideline in federal statute.
But I'm going to hire a lawyer who's going to explain to you the difference between shall and must.
Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time, and people, have those sorts of arguments. It usually doesn't happen about things like this because, I don't know, it's just normally the quality of people running for this office is better. And that's what they were counting on when they wrote the law. It's always the case that you can say, well, what if I just don't?
No, people have the expectation that I shall respect the office, but it doesn't say I must.
Right. So, that's basically it. That's the big loophole is what if it says here that the vice president does this? Well, what if he doesn't? Huh?
Right. And so bigger picture here, Will Bunch had a nice piece on it from the Philadelphia Inquirer. At Texas rally, Trump all but promised a racially charged civil war if he's indicted.
Yes.
Let's put this in perspective here. Let's do this Joe Rogan style. Let's just be plain about what we're saying.
Why don't you, we'll have a guest on that says this is a good idea. Go ahead.
Well, David, what do you think about this a rally where he said that he promised that if you don't like the results and all these racist judges are indicting me, you should basically protest?
Well, I'm no expert, but I think we should arrest them all and hold them indefinitely in Guantanamo.
Well, that's an interesting perspective.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad we got that cleared up. I didn't ask the guy on who said we should bomb his rally, but that's because I'm being responsible. But I'm just saying that that's out there. Right. So we don't want to do that, and that's why we're not on Spotify. But I mean, this is essentially, I guess, what you can do with the same thing. I'm going to have, it's not me saying it, it's an expert. You see, I'm just asking questions. Why did you say that we should bomb? That's awful. That feels like the wrong thing to do. Yeah. Right.
So Will Bunch writes, amid the predictable reiterations of the big lie that Biden's legitimate 2020 election was stolen and his other narcissistic blather, Trump's lengthy speech in Conroe, Texas, this was Texas, I think, contained three elements that mark a dangerous escalation. Let's digest and analyze each of them. For the first time, Trump, if somehow elected again in 2024, and more on that, and upon returning to the White House in January 2025, dangled pardons before people convicted of crimes. If I run and win, we'll treat these people from January 6th fairly, he told the rally.
Yes.
And if it requires pardons, we'll give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
Well, crime.
Now, is he talking about the 700 mostly low-level insurrectionists or talking about Giuliani, Bannon, Meadows, and others who could be subject to criminal probes?
Mostly.
Now, whether it's obstruction or whether it's witness tampering, I'll just say it's within character.
Yes. And it's super dangerous for so many reasons that he probably doesn't even realize or care about.
No, but it's typical Trump, right? He's promising Giuliani a pardon, and then the 700 who were trespassers and low-level folks, but who basically are the soldiers who literally have the arms, they hear it as, he's talking about me.
Yeah, I mean,
he doesn't know who you are and he doesn't care about you.
That's right. I would remind those people that's what you thought he was talking about the first time, and it turns out it wasn't you, it was Mike Flynn and Roger Stone. So, don't count on it, but P.S., if it's going to land you in jail and you're not going to get a pardon, then count on it, go ahead. And it'll be my pleasure to arrest you and watch you rot. But okay. It's a super dangerous thing, of course, to run on a platform like that. And I wondered over the weekend, since the media loves playing the game of, but won't having a carve out for voting rights in the filibuster mean that when Republicans take over, they'll do much worse? They'll get rid of the filibuster for regular legislation and then run roughshod over the minority Democrats? Won't that just make them do that? I would like to see them play this game on the pardons issue, because my question is, won't threatening or promising to pardon insurrectionists if you should win, or if they should rise up and put you in office even if you lose the next election, then I'll pardon you. Wouldn't that just make somebody else run on the platform of, if you assassinate Donald Trump, I will pardon you? I mean, can't you just go to that? You can. It's super dangerous. You don't want to play that game. That's why you don't dangle pardons about,
I'm just asking questions, that's all.
That's right. But, I mean, I'm just asking the experts whether that isn't the end result of continued escalation in this pardon game. If you're going to pardon people who will violently take up arms against the United States government because you capture the presidency, then I think somebody else might run on the platform of, I will get rid of this Donald Trump problem once and for all. In fact, you will get rid of this Donald Trump problem once and for all. And when you do, I'll pardon you, and then it'll all be good, because that's the power of the presidency. If you can accept that platform from Donald Trump, there's nothing wrong with the second platform. So don't accept it from Donald Trump, because you don't want to land on that second platform.
Well, that wasn't the only dangerous part. Again, Will Bunch writes, in a sign that Trump is increasingly worried about the overlapping probes, House January 6th committee and the remarkable evidence they've uncovered that will likely be referred to the Justice Department, the Fulton County grand jury investigation into Georgia election tampering, and the unrelated probe into dodgy Trump family finances in New York. He explicitly called for mob action if charges are lodged in any of these jurisdictions. Said Trump, quote, if these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, I hope we're going to have in this country the biggest protest we ever had.
Yeah, well, wrong.
Right, but let's take a step back and drill down on arguably the most important and alarming word in Trump's statement, racist. At first blush, it seems to come out of left field in the sense of what could be racist about looking at the white man's role in an attempted coup or his cooked books, except that it happens that three of the key prosecutors, the Fulton County District Attorney, New York State Attorney General, and New Manhattan prosecutor, as well as the chair of the House committee, are all black.
Yeah, that's right. Like the Mexican judge that hates him so much.
So it's both alarming and utterly predictable that Trump would toss the gasoline of racial allegations onto his flaming pile of grievances.
Yeah.
So Trump's chief weapons are fear and intimidation and surprise and torture. Something like that. Four chief weapons. To save American democracy, the people tasked with getting to the bottom of a former president's high crimes and misdemeanors on Capitol Hill and in those key courthouses must be ready for the violence that Trump is inciting and must summon the courage to finish their job.
Right.
We can act forcefully to stop this new insurrection and punish his past crimes, or we can sit back and let the comet of autocracy strike. I don't think he's wrong. From the conservative point of view, this is Charlie Sykes writing in the Bulwark, and there it is. A stew of sedition and obstruction, talking about that very same rally. Nothing veiled about his suggestions, and the stew of sedition and obstruction doesn't require extended commentary.
Okay. Stew, huh? Oh, that's all right. That's interesting. Yeah, that's one way of describing it. I guess that's the conservative way.
Toxic stew.
Yeah, okay. That's true.
Meanwhile,
it doesn't have to be delicious beef stew.
So why don't Democrats ever do anything? Well, actually, they are. That's the January 6th committee. And, a lot of this stuff is, in fact, progressing in the courts. And Trump is certainly feeling the pressure, which is why he was so blatant about what was going on here. Meanwhile, doesn't it all depend upon the next election? Well, New York State came out with their redistricting stuff. And as Bill Kristol puts it, Democrats probably picked up 4 House seats in the next election, thanks to New York redistricting.
Well, okay, then I guess.
Dave Wasserman says a 22-4... they lose a seat, but Republicans go from 8 to 4. Not unreasonable. Elise Stefanik is fine. Lee Zeldin is not fine, which is probably why he's running for governor.
Okay. That's the usual shakeout of these things.
And Connor Sen points out, of the 95 House seats in California, Illinois, and New York, Democrats will be in a position to win 80-plus in neutral to dem-leaning environments. And some of the conservatives are very unhappy about what New York did. And, the fact of the matter is redistricting is actually going to, if anything, break slightly in favor of the Democrats. So the issues with the House have to do with the pandemic, the economy, and Biden's job approval. it's not a redistricting thing that's going to lose the House for Democrats.
There are plenty of other
say
reasons.
in New York, forget about it. Okay? Just work on those other things.
There are plenty of other things that are equally equally dangerous as we thought redistricting could be, and certainly other things that are much worse and much more blatant in their targeting. So, yes. All right. Well, I was surprised to find that was the case, but increasingly people who are watching the redistricting closely are saying it did not turn into nearly the disaster people feared it might, although that just makes me worry that somehow, somewhere, the disaster is hidden and will break.
Well,
later.
that's the way to approach 2022, right?
Generally.
It wasn't the disaster you thought. This is the disaster you thought.
Right. You knew
no
that there was
to
a
approach
big
this year.
disaster or several big disasters out there. You guessed wrong about which they were, but you got the number right. There are 3. Oh, okay.
So this is a piece by Tom Edsall, who often writes interesting things because he interviews political scientists, and that's why I found his weekly column so interesting.
Here's $100 million, Tom. Go for it.
Right. America has split, and now it's in very dangerous territory.
All right.
And basically what he does is he had interviews with a bunch of political scientists and then put together this very interesting graph, which I'm going to take a screenshot and give you so you could see it for yourself.
All right.
And it's basically a measure of New York,
There it is.
United States, and other area polarization. You want to understand Staten Island. You want to understand Susan Collins. Just look at the graph here. Political polarization rating from 2000, where it was on a 1 to 5 scale, rated as a 1.5 in the U.S. is now a 3.8 or so. Mm-hmm. So polarization has gotten so bad that so-called moderates like Susan Collins basically are going to take the Republican line, and the Republican line is, I voted to impeach Donald Trump, but of course I, give him a fair-minded look if he runs again, and I won't rule out supporting him.
I mean, I voted
because
to
let's take the Joe
bar
Rogan
him
approach
from
to
office
politics
forever.
here.
I guess so. Right. Well,
That sounds
there you go.
reasonable. I mean, how reasonable can you get?
That is, I guess you're right, the Joe Rogan approach. I sound reasonable, but I did land on something unreasonable. But the point is,
pretty
I
much.
said it reasonably.
But I did it in a subtle way that you can't blame me for, because I'm just asking the same questions everybody else would ask. Every Republican should ask.
Okay.
Now, one of the fascinating things about this, and there's been a lot of stuff written about this, is that when you look at Donald Trump's approval among Republicans, it's dropping.
Yeah. Well, good.
No good. It used to be 90.
Yeah. And less now, I assume.
Well, now it's in the 70s. That's a big drop.
Well, that's true. It is a big drop. Not where you wish it would be, but okay.
It
but
is
this
if
is
you're
among
Ron DeSantis.
Republicans. Yes. Oh, that's true.
And the other thing
But I'm
that people have noticed is that there's been a lot of DeSantis, Trump head-to-head, who would you vote for stuff. And whereas Trump used to lead by 60, now he leads by 20, 25.
Okay.
And that's dropping.
That's a thing.
And, if you're DeSantis, you're looking at this and saying, well, in a couple of months, it's going to be in the single digits. And I can deal with that. And if you're looking at Trump, you have to be sweating.
So does
Because, he's going to say a lot of not nice things about DeSantis. And the problem for him is when you look at that political polarization, the base, which is where you get your votes in a Republican primary, is totally anti-vax, which is where DeSantis is. And that's not where Trump is.
That's true. That's true. That's interesting. I was wondering if that would ever catch up with him.
It is. It's
We'll
catching up.
see. Good. All right.
It's like when he was president and decided that I'm not going to do anything about vaping because my FDA and CDC says it's dangerous, but those are my voters.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
touching
guess.
that.
I forgot about the vaping one. Huh. Well, one wonders then where Ron DeSantis comes down on the idea of is it going to help me or hurt me that there are Nazis having rallies in Orlando?
That's the worry.
Yeah,
Well, let's just put it this way. He wants to have his own police force to look at elections.
that's
So
Nazi-ish.
guess which way
Maybe
he's
he
going
could get
to.
those
I'm just
guys.
asking questions
Yeah,
of
right.
the experts.
And if I suppose if you're wondering
Let me
where
have
would
David
you get
Duke
such
on and ask him about that.
That's true. And just to say, I
Where
want
do you
you to
come
say
down
it
on
in
the
an
idea
even
of
tone.
having election police, David?
Yeah, and what about recruiting them from the roadside in Orlando, where they were parading with Nazi flags and taunting people at stoplights? That would be, just maybe they're qualified. I don't know. We'll take a look, see what there's on their resumes.
Right.
Okay.
So, the bottom line here, whether you're talking about Joe Rogan or whether you're talking about Ron DeSantis or whether you're talking about Aaron Rodgers, it's very important to make the distinction between this guy's correct, what this guy's saying is bad, and this guy's popular.
Okay.
They're all different.
Yeah, that's true.
All of them are popular. That's not the point. If you want to understand why they're popular, that's interesting. And that gets to the, what are they saying and whether or not what they're saying is bad. And that's worthy of discussion. But don't try to say they're not popular. They are. Just like Trump is among Republicans.
That's true. Less popular, that's also true, but popular nonetheless.
Yeah. And so that's my Monday wrap-up for all over the place because so many things happen.
Okay. Seems like a reasonable place to stop. All right.
Oh, by the way, Nadal won the Australian Open, and he's a really good guy.
Oh, okay.
And so
congratulations.
Good guys don't always finish last.
That's nice.
Oh, and you know who didn't win?
Yeah, that other guy. He got kicked out.
Djokovic didn't win. He got kicked out.
How's he going to do in France?
I don't know. It's not clear he can play.
All right.
It's not clear where he's going to be able to play.
Well, maybe he'd like to get in. Maybe Spotify would like to sponsor a tennis tournament.
Or a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, about tennis tournaments that you didn't play in. I would get interview him as an expert in not playing in the Australian Open. But then again, there's lots of those. I didn't play in the Australian Open, for instance.
Right. So you have a whole season there.
Right.
You could have somebody on who didn't play in the Australian Open every week.
Mm-hmm.
Easily.
Okay. Yeah.
3 years.
That's right. Endless shows. You can pitch this to Spotify. We'll never run out of material or content, as you like to call it.
Right. Anyway, that's it for me for today.
Okay.
Just things I came across.
All right.
Just a regular guy asking questions.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you a question about somebody else who's been controversial recently. Just quickly, I got an article. You can see the urgency here is I got an article from my mom. Okay.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So now I have to ask this question. All right. New York Times. The power of boosters was a morning thing that they sent around, and I'm getting set. They're like, you should read it. I think it's important for everybody to read it. And I'm scrolling down, and I see it's Dave Leonhardt, and he's had some problems recently.
Yes.
What is it? What's
the Joe
this?
Rogan of columnists?
Yeah. What's going on here? Should I be reading this thing because it's about good information? But does he screw it up? Where's
it's
Leonhardt
great information that he screws up, absolutely, but he doesn't screw up about that.
Okay.
Leonhardt is right on the money when it comes to vaccines.
All right. I forget what he screwed up. I just remember that he did screw something up.
It's, liberals and conservatives are both taking a tribal approach to this whole pandemic, and it's really too bad. Tut-tut, you really should be in the middle like me. But let there be no doubt, boosters are good.
Okay.
That's basically his article.
All right. Good. Well, then I'll feel safer doing it. I just want to make sure. Now I have to check.
Watch out
Joe
for
Rogan
the both
needs
sides
checking.
Stuff. I mean, it's definitely in there.
All right. We'll be on the lookout for that. All right. Only one side is right, and that's us. Damn it. There you go. I don't know.
Well,
if that's
I've told you for a long time, I happen to be in the exact middle of the political spectrum because everybody else is to the left and to the right. I keep checking, and every week it's still true.
Yeah. Well, even when the polarization
So therefore,
changes.
when I tell you something's reasonable, by definition, it's right in the middle of the country.
Damn straight, I guess. I don't know. I'll be willing to say it if it's worth $100 million. I'll agree. Although I could be tempted to just be a partisan for 50 mil if anyone's interested. I'll just find out. Okay.
Well, I'll take a different approach.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'll take 100 mil, but I'll only be partisan for 20 minutes of the 60.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's your usual segment anyway, right? If we just scale it down to an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, I think you can go to the bank on it.
And if you like that, I'll do you even better. For 100 million, I'll be partisan and do the entire segment for 1 minute.
Yeah, right.
What a bargain.
Keep driving it down.
Look at honestly. You're saving so many minutes here.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait. I'm counting
the
the money
already. You can take your
already.
minutes to the bank. You can bank your minutes and use it on something else.
Fantastic. This is obviously a guarantee of fabulous wealth for the foreseeable future. We should buy some of those cartoon monkeys. The NFTs.
I suppose.
I'm going to start now. It's so reasonable and very sophisticated. It makes you seem like you really know what you're doing with money.
Yeah, I was just reading a story this morning about how the Chinese government is doing an incredible amount of money spends on getting influencers in various and sundry places. Because, it's a thing for propaganda.
Chinese
so, being an influencer means you get paid to say something but pretend that you're ordinary. That was the whole pitch.
Yeah.
I'm just an ordinary person doing ordinary things, just showing you how lovely it is here in Beijing.
Yes. Meanwhile, that's Joe Rogan's appeal, apparently. So, now we have to wonder, where did Spotify get this $100 million, and are they really the Chinese government?
I don't know.
It's a podcast.
Let's finish up with a overseas observations.
All right.
And this time about the Russians.
I'm glad I
Olivier Knox points out Biden and the team may go after individual Russians in government or oligarchs. And
Sure.
The Brits may follow. It's an interesting approach. That may be the best way toward peace. If you go to war, we're going to seize your assets.
All right. That's
right?
important.
And Putin, you don't care. You represent the Russian people. But your oligarchs, I think they'll care.
Yeah, no, that's how else would you deal with it? They don't work like a regular government anymore. That's a good recognition of reality.
Yeah, so I thought that was actually pretty interesting.
Okay. Yes.
There's a story that came from. Anyway, that's it. That takes you to the end of the hour.
It does.
And so you're off the hook then for this hour.
For that 5 minutes.
You're responsible. And according to Joe Rogan, it's okay not to really be sure exactly what you're going to do.
That's right. I know
somebody should pay David $100 million for this.
Right. I might not even take a break in 30 seconds unless somebody pays me $100 million or something like that. I wish I had something to hold hostage that people cared about. All right. Well, thanks, Greg, and we'll catch up with you. Again
it's a better approach than
Wednesday.
Pay me $100 million or the puppy gets it.
Yeah, that's right for puppy fans. Anyway, on the other hand, I'm just saying we might have an expert on here who hates puppies, and you're gonna have to listen to him.
We're just asking questions.
That's right, as many as we're allowed inside of our 2-hour block, and I guess we could even expand that or contract it.
Yeah, puppy's gonna have to go for a walk.
That's right. Okay, so 20-minute show. All right, thanks, Greg. We'll catch up again on Wednesday. Very good. And as for the rest of you, I guess we could go ahead and fulfill my mom's wishes and read this article about boosters. How about that? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. I feel like there's other topics quite important to get to, although honestly, I wasn't sure how much time I wanted to give to the former guy and his stupid rally, except it's extremely important, and he said some really dangerous things, and we couldn't ignore it, certainly. I am a little tired of the pandemic stuff, but that's actually, should be our chief concern, because, if we never get out from underneath this thing, it's going to affect everything that we do, not just change the way you live your everyday life, but it obviously rubs off on the politics as well, and creates openings for stupid, horrible things to happen. So we'll catch up on the booster things. Now that I've sort of teased that, I feel like we owe it. I certainly owe it to Mom here to read the piece here. The Power of Boosters. And I'm interested in catching up on this. Oh, I needed to check with Greg on something else, too, about they sent me over the weekend. Well, we'll check up on it on Wednesday. But questions about what people should be doing booster-wise if they got the Johnson & Johnson shots. And I thought originally that the decision was that the J&J people might do well to get a booster shot of one of the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna, and be doubly covered that way, and to get one of each type of shot. And then he sent something over the weekend that looked like it was suggesting that perhaps people who got the Johnson & Johnson shot should get 2 boosters of mRNA. But now it looks like, as I was reading the article, it kind of looks like maybe they're saying Johnson & Johnson people should get a second and then a third Johnson & Johnson shot, too. So a little bit of, there's never going to be perfect clarity on what to do. And that makes me annoyed, actually, that and it must make people who got the Johnson & Johnson shot consciously chose that one because it was one dose shot, particularly annoyed to find out that they are going to have to get multiple shots in order to keep the immunity levels up. I mean, that's just the way it turned out. What can you do? The virus mutates and changes and hung around for a lot longer than we thought it was going to, probably because of all the people who won't get vaccinated or won't get their boosters or won't wear masks for that matter. And so blame them if you're upset about it, but, other people are more simplistic about it. They said one shot, and now they're saying something completely different, and why should I ever trust them again? I don't know, but if you want to live, what's the difference? You went out of your way, you got the shot, you survived that, everything was fine. Try it again. Just, because the alternative is getting very sick and possibly dying. So to me, it's an easy call. But I wanted to clear that up. But I think I need Greg on the line for that one. In the meantime, the power of boosters generally. New CDC data shows their effectiveness. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. Even David Leonhardt was able to grasp that. I'm curious about seeing what the both-siderism is in this. The CDC has begun to publish data on COVID outcomes among people who have received their booster shots, and the numbers are striking. Guess what? You'll never believe it. As it turns out, people who get the shots, booster shots, are better protected against serious illness and death. So there you go. The chart that he chooses to illustrate the point is the weekly average deaths per 100,000 from October to November of 2021, wherein the unvaccinated are 7.8 deaths weekly out of every 100,000 people. The vaccinated without boosters, though, just 0.6 out of per 100,000, or 6 per million, I guess, if you want to make it a whole number. And with a booster, 0.1 per 100,000, which brings up, again, the scale. Why not go with a million so that you can just literally say that it is literally 1 in a million for you to get boosted and die from COVID? I mean, that's what 0.1 per 100,000 is. It's 1 in a million. And why you wouldn't go with that, I don't know. But maybe he's both siding it, the whole thing. Sure, it would be easy and easy to grasp if we just said 1 in a million. But on the other hand, we would like to confuse people. So instead, we'll say it's 0.1 in 100,000. As you can see, vaccination without a booster provides a lot of protection, but a booster takes somebody to a different level. And by the way, so for all the people who are running around saying, now they say they might even have to give you a 4th booster, so that's just proof that it doesn't work. Well, you see the numbers in front of you. The numbers won't mean as much to you as the bar graph, but if you take a second to think about what it might look like to compare the number 7.8 to the number 0.6 and 0.1, you'll get the idea. It's a much higher chance that you could mathematically get the number. What is it? So 0.6, I guess, times 10 would get you to 6, but we're talking about 7.8. So let's see, times 11 would be 6.6, and then so 12 times, what? 12 times more people are dying. I was going to say more likely, but that's not necessarily the same thing. But 12 times more death for the unvaccinated than the people getting vaccinated even without the booster. And considerably more times. And it's probably even easy math because it's 0.1, but I'm not going to venture to do it live on the radio. But get yourself vaccinated and boosted, and then you can do pretty much, what you like in terms of, you should still be wearing your masks, particularly with the Omicron variant. And the October to November 2021 stuff doesn't include the Omicron variant. But you can talk all the smack you like once you're vaccinated and boosted. It's the people who are unvaccinated and then post all the time on Facebook daring the virus to come and kill them who are getting killed. So, if you feel like if you got the urge to dare the virus to do anything, get vaccinated and boosted and then dare it. And then you'll win. You'll be 1 in a million if it finds you. Anyway, as you can see, vaccination without a booster provides a lot of protection, but a booster takes somebody to a different level. And if you, boo-hoo, ever get a fourth vaccine and a fourth booster, and they said we wouldn't have to, then I imagine you would be even more protected. And they'd be talking about 0.0 something per 100,000. You'd be in fantastic shape. It's only a fraction of people out of a million. You have to go to 10 million to get it to a whole number. Anyway, this data underscores both the power of the COVID vaccines and their biggest weakness, both sides, there you go, namely their gradual fading of effectiveness over time, as is also the case with many other vaccines. That's true, too. If you received 2 Moderna or Pfizer vaccine shots early last year, the official statistics still count you as fully vaccinated. In truth, you are only partially vaccinated. But then again, 0.6 out of 100,000, that's still pretty good. Once you get a booster, your risk of getting severely ill from COVID is tiny. It is quite small, even if you are older or have health problems. The average weekly chance that a boosted person died of COVID was about 1 in a million. See? He did, in fact, take the opportunity to say that. During October and November, the most recent available CDC data. Since then, the chances have no doubt been higher because of the Omicron surge, but they will probably be even lower in coming weeks because the surge is receding, at least where David Leonhardt lives, and Omicron is milder, that's okay, than earlier versions of the virus. For now, 1 in a million people per week seems like a reasonable estimate. That risk is not zero, but it's not far from it. That chance that an average American will die in a car crash this week is significantly higher, about 2.4 million. And of course, now out come the people who are saying, well, why aren't you doing anything about that? Well, we are. It's highly regulated who can get a car, seat belts, all sorts of federal regulations about safety, et cetera, et cetera. You're just dumb and don't realize it. So, I'm just asking those questions for people for the guests I'm not having on the show. I'm posing the questions they might pose that are dumb and the smart answers to them. Thank you. $100 million, please. So, is the average weekly death rate from, the average weekly death rate from influenza and pneumonia, about 3 per million. And somebody had an interesting tweet earlier today. I'll scroll back. I don't think it's all that far back in my own retweets, but somebody pointing out that the number of deaths in the last 2 weeks, more people have died from COVID than have died from the flu. There it is. Craig Spencer, MD. All right. We've heard his name a number of times from Greg, the Let's Go Bowling, e-bowling, I never really put that together, bowling with Ebola doc, who took care of business and got himself cured and didn't give everybody else Ebola. More Americans died of COVID in the past 2 weeks than have died of influenza in the past 3 years. So just remembering the former guy saying, who knew this? I bet you didn't know the flu kills a quadrillion people every day. Who knew? So this COVID thing, we have 15 cases. Pretty soon it'll go away and there'll be 0. It'll be completely gone. You'll see in the spring of 2020, you remember? By April, by Easter 2020, everybody should be in the pews together. It'll be such a beautiful thing because it's going to disappear because we're going to take care of it. There's now 75 million cases of COVID so far, cumulatively, that have been reported in the United States. Almost like 15, except if 15 were 75 and it was millions instead of singles. Okay, so single digits. Terrific. He's so smart at this stuff. Anyway, back to the other guy. With a booster shot, COVID resembles other respiratory illnesses that have been around for years. It can still be nasty. For the elderly and immunocompromised, it can be debilitating, even fatal, much as the flu can be. The Omicron surge has been so terrible because it effectively subjected tens of millions of Americans to the flu all at once. You got that? The whole country got the flu. For the unvaccinated, of course, COVID remains many times worse than the flu. I'm highlighting these statistics because there is still a large amount of vaccine skepticism in the U.S. I have heard it frequently from readers in the past week after our poll on COVID attitudes and partisanship, as well as the daily episode about the poll. The vaccine skepticism takes two main forms. The more damaging form is the one that's common among Republicans. I say, thank God, under my breath, but all right. They're so skeptical of vaccines. How skeptical are they? I say they're so skeptical of vaccines, partly from misinformation coming from conservative media figures, some of whom are on the Joe Rogan show, and Republican politicians, that many remain unvaccinated, although fewer than before because they're dead. I would say hesitate to add, except I couldn't wait to add that. What's another phrase for that? I'm excited to add. Look at this detail. You can't, but I'll tell you about it. From the Kaiser Family Foundation's latest portrait of vaccination. Incredibly, there are more unvaccinated Republican adults than boosted Republican adults. That does seem odd. What's the chart here? U.S. adults by political affiliation status and vaccination status. Among Democrats, 9% unvaccinated. There are still people who do that for various reasons. 29% of Democrats are vaccinated but haven't gotten their booster yet, and 62% of Democrats have gotten it all. What should we do next? Independents or Republicans? Independents, supposedly in the middle of all this stuff. There are 22% of independents are unvaccinated. 39% are vaccinated but have not had their booster. 37% have got the full series among independents. And there's your proof, by the way, for people who, I don't know, there's nobody listening to the show who still thinks that independents aren't just embarrassed Republicans, right? The numbers will tell you that. Again, unvaccinated Dems. Now, I guess we'll do the Republicans now. And or I don't know. We'll go across the board now. We did the Dems and the independents. So among the unvaccinated, 9% of Democrats unvaccinated, 22% of independents unvaccinated, 36% of Republicans unvaccinated. That makes it seem like the independents are pretty much kind of really actually Republicans. 36 and 22 versus 9 and 36. Among those, so partisan breakdown of those vaccinated with no booster. 29% of Democrats are vaccinated with no booster. Here's not much difference. 30% of Republicans vaccinated with no booster. 39% of independents vaccinated with no booster. So that's interesting. The people who have the highest number of people who've got the full series, the Democrats. 62% of Democrats have gotten what we'll call all three shots, the full series. Whereas among the people who are unvaccinated completely, the Republicans win, 36%. What about in the middle position of being vaccinated but not having gotten the booster? Guess who wins? The independents. What a surprise. With 39%. 30% of Republicans vaccinated no booster. 29% of Democrats vaccinated no booster. So across the board, the popular thing to do is to be the 6 in a million who can still be killed by the virus for having been vaccinated but not gotten the booster. But, of course, the most popular position among Republicans is just plain old unvaccinated. Well, anyway, this lack of vaccination is killing people. It's cost the lives of people I know, including just last week a friend of 35 years, a person I met on one of the first weekends of my freshman year of college. David French, a conservative writer who lives in Tennessee, wrote in The Atlantic. And that's a very, I guess, Lynn Hart kind of thing to do, to lead with a David French quote on this. I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to see person after person fall to a virus when a safe and effective shot would have almost certainly not just saved their life, but also likely saved them from even having a serious case of the disease. So on a human scale, I think he's absolutely right. If you want to be a humanist about it, sure, be like David French. But I got to tell you, there's still part of me that says, I I've said from the beginning of the pandemic that this thing is like a neutron bomb for morons. Even before there was a vaccine, I said that because there were people saying that it's a hoax and I can't wait to go out in the crowd. And then they would get COVID and die. And people who stayed home, much less the case that they were getting COVID and dying, but it was happening because we didn't have a vaccine. Now that we have a vaccine, just go get the damn thing and you probably won't die. Whereas if you fight about it and not only don't get the vaccine, but say, I'm going into large crowds and I'm going to protest and I'm going to go to stores without masks on and I'm going to dare the virus to kill me, well, it'll kill you. And, because I'm not a nice person when it comes to this, I say, good. Because then you're not around to be a host for a new variant later and make things even worse. You want to dare the virus to kill you? I'm a libertarian when it comes to that. Good, go ahead, do it. Stay away from me. It doesn't work that way with, public health. That's not the way it works. We're supposed to all be in it together, and so therefore we don't want the virus to hang around and kill you, but karmically, maybe, yes. You're nowhere near me. So, I don't know. It makes things bad for people who are trying to follow the rules around enclaves of unvaccinated idiots, but I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll move on with the article. Dr. Peter Hotez, H-O-T-E-Z, is that right? Hotez? A vaccine expert at the Baylor College of Medicine estimates that in the second half of last year, 200,000 Americans needlessly lost their lives because they refused COVID vaccines. I don't know how needless that was. 3 doses of either Pfizer or Moderna will save your life, Hotez told me. It's the only way you can be reasonably assured that you will survive a COVID-19 infection. Young children who are not yet eligible for the vaccines are also highly unlikely to get very sick, and that's good news. The vaccines don't prevent only death. Local data shows the risk of hospitalization are extremely low too. Vaccination also reduces the risk of long COVID to very low levels. The second form of vaccine skepticism is among Democrats, although many would recoil at any suggestion that they are vaccine skeptics. Most Democrats are certainly not skeptical about getting a shot, but many are skeptical that the vaccines protect them. Is that right? About 41% of Democratic voters say that they are worried about getting seriously sick with COVID, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation poll released last week. That's a very high level of anxiety for a tiny risk. Yeah, well, I guess this is the both sidesism. Like, well, are you fully vaccinated? Yes. Are you worried about getting seriously sick with COVID? Yes. Does that mean you're a vaccine skeptic? No, it means I worry about getting sick. But shouldn't the full series of vaccines basically mean that statistically you have virtually no chance of becoming seriously ill with COVID? Yes. But you worry about it nonetheless? Well, yes, it's a disease that can kill you, and true, 1 in a million people can get it. Maybe a more accurate thing would be to say Democrats are chronic worriers, and so they're afraid that they'll be the 1 in a million. But that doesn't mean they're vaccine skeptics. Although if you wanted to talk about the ones that didn't get the vaccine, then you'd be on solid ground, I guess. Anyway, here's proof that much of the fear is irrational. Young Democrats are more worried about getting sick than old Democrats, even though the science says the opposite should be true. But anyway, see any study about fear of terrorism. The fact that you're more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a terrorist doesn't stop us from establishing a Department of Homeland Security and not a Department of Watch Out for Lightning. But that's what we've done. And probably with David Leonhardt's support. So, anyway, then there's a chart about how worried are you that you will become seriously sick from the coronavirus. It's not the question, do you predict that you will become seriously ill from the coronavirus? It's how worried are you about it? How worried am I? I'm so worried that I'm willing to go get 3 injections and wear a mask everywhere. I worry that it could happen. Yes. That's why I took these precautions. Do I predict that it'll happen to me, that I'll get seriously ill, that I'll be the 1 in a million? No, I would not predict that. That's a different question. But I guess to both sides that we have to, it's probably not why they asked the question this way, but that's what David Leonhardt is doing with it. It certainly seems to be the case for me. All right. Well, let's see. So I guess the big difference, the huge disparity in our polarized society is that among Democrats aged 18 to 49, how many of them are very worried about becoming seriously sick with the coronavirus? 14%. How about among Republicans? 6%. Wow. That is twice as many, but, when you're talking about 14% as the top threshold here, then, all right, you're not very many. And I guess it probably doesn't surprise me that, I don't know. I know the science says that the older you are, the more likely you are to become seriously sick from coronavirus. But, I guess if the question is, are you worried about it? I don't know. Asking young people, like, if there's a virus out there that kills people and you could get it, what kind of worry do you have that you would be cut down in the prime of your life and be robbed of, 60 plus years of your lifespan versus asking people, say, 65 and over, that's the group that they have here, how worried are you? Well, I've survived a lot as it is. And also, I'm protecting myself from doing the best I can. I'm not looking at another 60 years of lifespan. To me, that would color, my response. Yeah, I'm very worried about the fact that you can be killed by this virus. And, of course, some of these 18-year-olds are still in classes someplace and in places where the governors of their states are trying to force them to take their masks off. If you're 65 plus, you say, F you, governor, I'm not taking my mask off and I'm staying at home. So, if you're kind of forced to be out there every day, then it could be a bigger worry. Well, let's see what Leonhardt has to say about it. The most plausible explanation, he wants you to know, for this pattern is political ideology. Younger Democrats are significantly more liberal than older Democrats, according to the Pew Research Center and other pollsters too. Ideology tends to shape COVID views for a complex mix of often irrational reasons. The more liberal you are, the more worried about COVID you tend to be. The more conservative you are, the less worried you tend to be. I don't know. Worried, yes, but predicting that you will die from it is a different thing. I know that many liberals have an exaggerated sense of personal COVID risk. And that is actually a good thing because it pushes the country toward taking more precautions. Those precautions, according to this view, will reduce COVID's death toll, which truly is horrific right now. In a later newsletter this week, I will consider that argument. For now, oh boy, I will simply echo that many experts who have pleaded with Americans to get vaccinated and boosted. Okay. And you know what? Gosh, there's more, and I think we've kind of covered at this stage. Actually, there's not that much more to the Leonhardt article. There's more to scroll through on the page, but it's other garbage from the New York Times. So we'll just finish this up because the segment's almost done. I feel like too much time on COVID as it is. All right. What might help increase the country's ranks of vaccinated? Vaccine mandates, for one thing. That's true. Although many Republican politicians, as well as the Republican appointees on the Supreme Court, oppose broad mandates, private companies can still impose mandates on their employees and customers. Update, by the way, on the SCOTUS situation in terms of the mandate rejection. We are beyond 10 million new infections since the Supreme Court, including Samuel Alito, who worried aloud about this and was sure that they would be unfairly tarred with the brush of having responsibility for some of these infections. But too bad, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to count that every day. 10 million more infections since they cavalierly struck down the vaccine mandates and insisted that they would have nothing to do with growing numbers. 35,000 dead. Now, many of those people contracted the coronavirus well before the Supreme Court struck down the mandates. But if you want to know something about the upshot and how quickly it will make itself apparent, 10 million more infections, 35,000 more dead. 10 million infections because of the Omicron surge is a fairly serious thing. And for people who tell you, why are you worried about this virus? 99% of people who get the virus survive. I got to remind you about big numbers. When 10 million people get the virus, that's 100,000 more deaths just from the people who have gotten it so far between January 13th, when they handed down their decision, and now. Yeah, as I've been pointing out, a quarter of all the infections in this country have happened since New Year's Eve. That's a big surge, and that's what a giant spike and exponential growth mean. So 100,000 more deaths on tap just from the people who have caught the virus since the Supreme Court said, you don't need to have government mandates after all. Anyway, without mandates, the best hope for increased vaccination is probably community outreach. While many unvaccinated Americans are firmly opposed to getting a shot, others, including some Democrats and independents, remain agnostic. If getting a vaccination is convenient and a nurse or doctor is available to answer questions, they'll consider it. So I guess he recommends that as well. We'll be right back after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. All right, well, there was like one paragraph left of the Leonhardt thing, and I don't know, I might even skip it. Let's see. Why not? We'll just throw it in there because it's a nice little story to finish up. A quote from somebody. I cannot count how many people I've spoken to about the COVID vaccine who have been like, no, I don't think so. No. Dr. Kimberly Manning of Emory University told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Then I run into them 2 weeks later and they tell me they got vaccinated. So, okay, that's good news. I mean, it's almost nothing to the whole thing. But all right. It's in there so that you can cover both sides or something like that. Anyway, we're done with that part of the vaccine coverage. However, I will say that during the course of our discussion, I want to note that we got a couple of comments about it. Let's see, Darwin chiming in here, by the way, saying that comment about independents really being embarrassed Republicans would also help explain Biden's low poll numbers among that demo. That's true. And then we got these notes from our friend Ricky the Kanakistani up in PEI, Prince Edward Island, if you're not hip to the lingo. But let's see, a couple of things, but I'm going to do them out of order here for various reasons, for reasons of the flow of the show. She noting here a couple minutes ago, I'm boosted as of yesterday, but I will not taunt the virus to come and get me. My mom always said I was 1 in a million. And yeah, you don't want to be that 1 in a million. So don't taunt the virus. Okay, that's a good policy, I think. She also notes here, I'm so used to wearing a mask that I was in the car and almost home before I remembered that I could take it off. That's true, and I've had that experience for sure, like yesterday. And really all winter. This winter, last winter, the whole thing. For me, maybe not so much. Maybe up in PEI, you're so used to wrapping a scarf around your face when you go out that you would say, all right, well, I'll remove the mask and then put this thing on. But I have been wearing the mask if I'm out shopping or something and then I leave the store, go get in the car, and the car's cold, I leave the mask on just because it's warm. And I'm used to having it on my face, and it's warm now, and if I take it off, it's going to be cold. So it's like a scarf for me. If you happen to have a scarf, then maybe that's better. You can take the mask off once you get to your car, put the scarf on instead. But me, it's keeping me warm. I think it's a great thing to have on. Even for walks outside where you're not supposed to need the mask. Sometimes I'll put it on for the first few minutes until I warm up. Anyway, there's that. And then the transition material. Actually, the first thing that Ricky sent us about an hour ago, saying, speaking of driving a truck through things, she was using the reference that about loopholes that you could drive a truck through that Greg had made. Right. Speaking of driving a truck through things, have you seen what's been going on in my nation's capital? Her nation, of course, not mine. Have you seen what's going on in my nation's capital, by the way? But everybody sees what's going on in my nation's capital, for better or for worse. Anyway, her nation's capital, of course, is capital of Canada, in Ottawa. The former guy, she notes, actually approved of the anti-mask, anti-vax, white supremacist convoy that's taken up residence at, eventually, Parliament Hill. There was some sort of, I don't know how far across the country they drove, cross-country, long-distance convoy of truckers that, I guess, ostensibly, if I recall correctly, were angry about vaccine mandates for truckers who crossed the borders. I guess, the border in between the U.S. and Canada, for one thing. But you would need to be vaccinated in order to enter the U.S. anyhow. And Ricky has mentioned before that they're pretty strict about travel in between the provinces in Canada as well, which would be a foreign sort of thing for us Americans. But that you have to be able to demonstrate your vaccine status to travel even in between Canadian provinces. So long-distance truckers would have trouble being able to do that if they were defiantly anti-vax. And I mean defiantly enough that they wouldn't go out and get fake vaccine cards, which is another problem that we have here, and presumably you have there as well. But yes, they've been driving across country to protest these vaccine mandates. And I just saw something about that last night when Kate Sherrill sent me some interesting news about it. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'll just make one quick diversion because in my timeline, my retweeting of Ricky's note about being boosted, which reminded me of her comment about the trucker protest and that they've taken up residence on Parliament Hill here, is right next to the Hill's announcement that this Justin Trudeau says he's tested positive for COVID-19. Now, I don't suggest that the truck drivers gave it to him, and I don't suggest that the truck drivers are going, well, they are Canadians. There is some possibility that they might say, oh, I actually feel sorry about that. Sorry, because we've come here, and they'll apologize, and we might have given Justin Trudeau COVID. But these guys, I think, would revel in it for whatever reason, even though it's not actually true that they gave it to him. But, otherwise you would look at this and say, hey, those are two strange things to have next to one another in the timeline. That a big convoy, in other words, a large disease-carrying caravan has traveled to the capital of Canada and given the Prime Minister, at the same time, the Prime Minister has contracted COVID-19. Well, you know what they say about those disease-carrying caravans. Those conservative guys hate those disease-carrying caravans, unless, of course, they are their caravans, in which case they're fantastic. Anyway, about that stupid caravan. Kate Sherrill sent me something yesterday. The tweet of, maybe you already follow on Twitter, RVA Wonk, Caroline or Bueno, PhD. She now identifies herself this way. RVA Wonk tweeting around this news that she picked up via Twitter, that participants in this far-right / anti-vaccine truck convoy in Canada claimed they couldn't find restaurants to serve them because, of course, none of them were vaccinated or would refuse to show vaccine cards anyway. So along the way across country, no restaurants would serve them. So at one point, one of the organizers suggested going to homeless shelters to take food meant for those who need it. And so they did. Caroline's comment, of course, absolutely shameful. They stole food from homeless people. How do you like that? If this were a movie, it would be comically evil, but it's real life and they are harming real people, so it's just evil. The far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy also drew condemnation from a huge swath of Canada today after participants parked their cars, trucks really, on hallowed ground and climbed all over the tomb of the unknown soldier because of how right-wing and patriotic and respectful they are. The participants, self-professed patriots, used the National War Memorial as a temporary parking lot. Participants in the far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy also reportedly harassed a bunch of employees at local businesses and hotels, as well as journalists covering the event. And from one of the tweets that she included in her initial kickoff tweet, they harassed the volunteers at the homeless shelter as well. So people turn out to serve food to the homeless, and they pester them and bother them and threaten them. And eventually, I guess, they ended up feeding them just to get rid of them. And, of course, what was interesting, I actually saw a pushback in favor of the truckers on Twitter yesterday saying, well, for the time that they were driving across country and no one would serve them food in a restaurant or even let them shelter in their hotels, they were homeless. So you should be feeding them because they were homeless. Of course, you should remember that a lot of these long-haul truckers sleep in their trucks pretty routinely, though obviously they have to get food somewhere too. But why they couldn't get takeout, I don't know. I think they probably could, but they didn't want it. They wanted to make a scene at a restaurant instead. There's also more. There's one more claim here. They also tried to assault this journalist, Evan Solomon, who tweets about this, and ended up hitting his cameraman with a full can of beer, which of course they should be drinking because of their being busy driving across the country. Although I will point out it looks to be a Michelob Ultra, so, questionable whether it's really a can of beer or not. Evan Solomon tweets just that. Seconds before I was doing my hit, no pun intended, for CTV News Channel, a guy in the crowd drilled a full beer can at me and just missed, but hit our camera gear. The guy then took off, so things are getting more angry. I could use a drink, but not like this. By the way, not this. Norm Ornstein actually commenting about this whole thing. Disgusting. But he's not talking about the Michelob Ultra. He's talking about them harassing the food pantry people to give them, or soup kitchen people, to give them the food that was intended for the homeless. The tweet of the Shepherds of Good Hope, who tweet at SGH, Shepherds of Good Hope, Ottawa. Hi, everyone. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Earlier today, our staff and volunteers experienced harassment from convoy protesters seeking meals from our soup kitchen. The individuals were given meals to diffuse the conflict. Management was then informed of the, they say it's one of two tweets, but they didn't thread them because they have better things to do there at the Shepherds of Good Hope. But maybe they don't tweet so often, and I'll be able to find this thing pretty quickly and find out what else they did in order to diffuse the situation. There we are. Yes, right. So management was then informed of the issue and no further meals were given to protesters. Our soup kitchen is committed to providing meals to people experiencing and at risk of homelessness in Ottawa. This weekend's events have caused significant strain on our operations at an already difficult time. So there you go. That is pretty low, but I guess if they were also just going to park all over the place and climb on the tomb of the unknown soldier, you weren't going to, expect a great deal from them. So anyway, by the way, just by way of clearing things up, Ricky wants us to know Trudeau was already in isolation with his family in an undisclosed location because one of his children tested positive. I had heard that he was awaiting the results of his test and was isolating because he was a close contact of, one of his kids. So that's true. So it definitely wasn't the truckers that gave it to him because he got it, or he probably contracted it before they got there. Plus, he was in isolation. Plus, it's an undisclosed location. So for all we know, he's in what's a really good remote location that's obscure and has a fantastically Canadian name, like Medicine Hat or something. Anyway, okay, he could be there, but he's probably not. And look, blame it on the truckers as far as I'm concerned. And by the way, stop calling it a convoy. That's cool and awesome sounding. It's a caravan. That's dirty and foreign sounding. Use that instead. All right, let's see. I know there's other stories out there. I have a billion of them, believe me. All right, this is what I'll have to do with the rest of my time. How about this? Let me scroll down and find the other one that I wanted to bring to your attention. I got two serious, like, voter suppression / oh my God, it's just a coup stories to share with you. And some of them a little more slippery and technical than others. How about we start with this one from Yahoo News? And I think, I don't remember whether this is the county we talked about last time and this is just more of the same or latest developments in the story, but this is current from yesterday's Guardian, but I found it via Yahoo News. Georgia County purges Democrats from election board and cancels Sunday voting. I know I've mentioned to you this to you before. I've tweeted about it before. You know, this is happening now. It's no longer a matter of, oh my God, they could just with these new laws that they're passing. Justin Glawe, Glawe, reporting from Griffin, Georgia for the Guardian. The judges met in private over a 2-day period in May for what might seem like a minor task, to choose the 5th member of an elections board in rural Spalding County, Georgia. And I'm fairly certain this is the county we read about earlier. And they mention now at the top of the story that this, I guess, initially begins in May. But we're just getting around to reporting it. But it bears repeating, so we'll read it again. You see what's happening? Choose a 5th member of the elections board for Spalding County, Georgia. But the meetings were by no means routine. They met in private, right? There's no record of their vote or their discussions. The interviews with Democratic and Republican applicants were conducted in private via Zoom calls, and the position was only vacant because of a new law specific only to Spalding County, recently introduced by the area's 2 Republican state lawmakers. In the end, the judges chose a Republican, someone who had never served in a government position related to elections, to be the 5th and deciding vote for the Spalding County Board of Elections and Registration. Almost immediately, that Republican, James Newland, cast that deciding vote to cancel Sunday voting, a historically heavy turnout day for black, largely Democratic voters. It was just the latest blow to the county's Democrats and another loss for a party that is losing control of elections boards across the state as Republican laws, brand new Republican laws, make GOP takeovers possible. But what happened in Spalding County is also just a fragment of GOP efforts nationwide to take over the apparatus of American elections. Their goal? To secure party control at every level of government, from the White House to state legislatures and elections offices, all the way down to the precinct level, by employing thousands of poll watchers to potentially call into question Democratic votes. Across the U.S., Republican legislatures have introduced more than 200 bills aimed at reducing local control over elections and restrict voting access, according to the States United Democracy Center. It sounded like democracy, but it's democracy. I'm not from, what's that, like a Wisconsin thing? Maybe, I don't know. You tell me if I got that wrong. Who would say democracy? Nobody? Anyway, all of it is aimed at ensuring that Republicans will have control over voting and elections rules in support of Donald Trump's false claims of widespread voter fraud in 2020. And by the way, if you don't believe he's going to win in 2024, he's going to send the mob to kill you. But yes, by the way, it is listed here as the States United Democracy Center, not the United States Democracy Center. That wasn't a slip up. That's the way it's written anyway. Maybe the writer's dyslexic, not me. I mean, maybe I am also, but anyway. And the Peach State is ground zero thanks to its increasingly central roles as a swing state and as the center of bogus disputes over the 2020 election results. The turn of events in Spalding County might have come as a shock to locals, a majority Democratic election board with 3 black women becoming a majority Republican board, all of a sudden, for no real reason, with 2 white men and another of Cherokee descent virtually overnight. But Spalding County is no outlier. In at least 5 other Georgia counties, local elections authorities have been restructured in favor of Republicans. It's all part of the same story, the nationwide push to place GOP officials in positions of authority over elections, even when they've lost the election over who should be in authority. The news isn't really covering it because it's so local, said Zachary Fuller, a political organizer and former Democratic candidate for office in Griffin, the county seat. But when it happens to so many counties, it's the same thing, even though it's different laws. It's voter suppression. At the heart of what happened in Spalding County is that new law, which itself is an example of the tactics Republicans are pursuing across the country to ensure they control elections. Passed in March, HB 769. Not nice. Changed the rules for determining the tie-breaking vote for Spalding's County Election Board. The 5-person board always has 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Previously, Democrats and Republicans would often flip a coin to determine the 5th member. But Republican state representatives, there are 2, David Knight and Karen, I'm not kidding, Karen Mathiak, introduced a new law requiring that the 5th member be chosen by a majority vote of the county's Superior Court judges. And believe me, you know that meant that they went and looked at these swing counties that were or that could be overturned by this, and took a look at who are, what position could we leave the choice of the 5th member to that would most often result in a Republican winning that 5th seat. And they went with Superior Court judges in the county. Those judges, Chief Judge Fletcher Sams, Scott Ballard, and Benjamin Coker, advertised the position in the local press for 30 days. All 3 judges are white. Sams says he identifies as an independent, which of course we know is an embarrassed Republican, while the other judges did not comment on their political affiliations, which is, oh my God, they'll catch me, I'm a Republican. In the end, the judges chose the inexperienced Newland over at least 2 black Democrats, including Vera McIntosh, who had been removed from her position on the board because HB 769 also required board members to live in Spalding County, which she does not. Maybe that's even reasonable. As well as Elbert Solomon, a longtime Democratic operative here. All they wanted to see was the fact that I was black because they couldn't tell by looking at my resume, Solomon said. I went to white colleges. I was an executive at Procter & Gamble. Even my last name wouldn't tell you that I was black. That's all they wanted to know. Wow. I can't help what people think, but that's ridiculous, Sams said, denying that race played any role in the judge's decision. I was very impressed with at least 1 or 2 Democratic candidates, and they were seriously considered. Regardless, the new law didn't come out of nowhere. Ever since Election Day of 2020, Republicans in Spalding County have used alleged problems with voting to justify their efforts to replace Democratic elections officials. On Election Day of 2020, some voters had initially been prevented from casting their ballots on machines equipped with software from Dominion voting systems. Marcia Ridley, the county's former Democratic elections supervisor, said it was a temporary software problem caused by Dominion, but soon the Republican Secretary of State, the great hero Brad Raffensperger, was calling for Ridley to step down, citing, quote, serious management issues and poor decision-making. Knight and Mathiak joined Raffensperger in calling for Ridley's removal, and less than 2 weeks later, asked the state's attorney general to investigate her for failing to properly post information about board meetings. It didn't end there. After the election, local Republicans were up in arms over claims of mishandled ballots. Mathiak and former Republican elections board member Betty Bryant, who believes the 2020 election was robbed from Trump, both claimed that they had heard from a person who had received 12 mail-in ballots. As a crowd gathered outside the Board of Elections, a Republican on the county commission recorded a video of the protesters and posted it to Facebook. Later, he posted a picture of a ballot envelope that contained no ballot, apparently in an attempt to suggest electoral fraud. What it proves, I don't know. Does the mood darken? I mean, if there's no ballot in there, what's fraudulent? What's happening? Anyway, as the mood darkened, concerned for their safety, Glenda Henley, a former Democratic board member, asked police to escort election workers to their cars. Next, the crowds started showing up at previously sleepy elections board meetings. We had so many people coming, and the audience would disrupt the meeting by shouting or saying ugly things, Henley said. One particularly loud voice was Roy McLean, a shooting range coach. Wow, what do you know? He has the loudest voice. A shooting range coach with a lengthy military career who had replaced a previous Republican board member. McLean had ties to Mathiak. He had fundraised for her and appeared alongside her at numerous events. McLean was always loud, always negative, according to Henley. When he came in, it was just turmoil. This is the Jim Jordan of the local board here. Anything to disrupt the business of elections. McLean did not respond to a request for comment, nor did Knight or Mathiak. Then in April, just days before the end of the 2021 legislative session, Mathiak and Knight escalated the situation, introducing HB 769. The bill caught some county officials off guard, according to emails obtained by American Oversight. Former elections board members told The Guardian that they had no prior warning that the bill was coming. But Solomon said the bill's purpose was obvious. He and others had worked in 2020 to register new county voters, most of them African American, a get-out-the-vote effort that produced results and nearly led to the election of the Democratic candidate Daoud Amin as mayor of Griffin. If you catch my drift. Daoud Amin. What happened is we increased registered voters here by 900 people in less than a year, Solomon said. We had a mayor's race here, and a black person almost won, and only lost by 15 votes. But they said, all right, they went and certified. They didn't allege electoral fraud and try to find him 15 votes. They just said, good try, but we lost. Demographics in Spalding County are changing, according to Solomon and Fuller. What was solidly Republican territory is now becoming more Democratic-leaning. They see the writing on the wall, Solomon said. If the new law was intended to increase Republican power, it worked. Newman was swiftly installed on the elections board. In an interview, Newman said he was chosen by the judges because they believed he would be an impartial tie-breaking vote. Despite the fact that he's a self-proclaimed Republican, and rejected the notion that race played a role, noting that he is of Cherokee descent. Newland claimed the judges told him that they chose him because I was the closest they could find out of the people who applied for the job to a neutral party. As for why he voted to cancel Sunday voting, Newland claimed the county couldn't afford a seventh day of voting. Yeah. So cancel a Wednesday. Even less neutral is the man appointed by the local GOP to one of the other two Republican board positions, Ben Johnson, a former election board member who resigned as head of the county Republican Party to take the job. Johnson, a fervent proponent of the false belief that the 2020 election was beset with widespread voter fraud, also runs an IT firm, Liberty Technology, that does maintenance for the county's computer equipment. Fuller calls it a clear conflict of interest for Johnson. If his company has direct control over the servers for Spalding County and the city of Griffin, he can see all the data from anyone who uses these public servers, Fuller said. That could be data collection used against voters to help organize, and that is data that other members of the board wouldn't have access to. Asked whether there was a conflict of interest, Mike Wyndham, the county's IT manager, said, off the top of my head, no, but the optics are a little funny. Johnson ignored repeated requests for comment, and at an election board meeting in early January responded to the Guardian's questions by saying, I don't talk to fake news, because that's how neutral he is. But Johnson's beliefs are well documented on his Facebook page. A little more than a year after Donald Trump lost the election in 2020 to Joe Biden, Johnson posted about the hours upon hours of videotaped ballot harvesting in Georgia, the phantoms all over, the dirty voter rolls, the withholding of subpoenaed materials. The list goes on. In person, Johnson is generally known as an intelligent and capable member of the Board of Elections, according to current and former colleagues from both parties, but his social media posts show a different side than the common polite face he presents to election board meetings. Specifically, Johnson has taken issue with Dominion Voting Systems, which handles the election software throughout Georgia and is the frequent target of conspiracy theories over voter fraud. Only last month, Johnson attacked Dominion at a board meeting, making a false claim that a judge in a Georgia lawsuit brought by a Republican had ruled that its software in Georgia was, quote, illegal. Right now, the judicial opinion is that the equipment we're using is illegal, which blows my mind, Johnson said. Well, that's not true. The judge has not ruled on the matter, and a trial is still pending. Then, Last month, as if all this turmoil wasn't enough, board members were hit with nearly 2,000 emails demanding yet another audit of the 2020 presidential election, despite 3 previous reviews conducted by the Republican Raffensperger, which all confirmed the win for Biden. You know this story. While it remains unknown who prompted more than 1,900 people, all from outside Spalding County, to join the email deluge. Some clues can be gleaned from the demands themselves. The emails were form letters and included references to a notorious conspiracy theorist, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, who was involved in the controversial and unnecessary audit by the Cyber Ninjas firm in Maricopa County, Arizona, which again confirmed Biden won there. According to Jim O'Brien, one of the 2 Democratic board members in Spalding County, the campaign has all the markings of an organized effort. It was a cyber attack intended to intimidate and harass, O'Brien said. I'd like to know if any local Republican officials knew about this. It's a good question. We can actually finish this, maybe. Slowly, the sense is dawning on these communities that individual cases like Spalding Counties are not one-offs, but are part of a pattern emerging nationwide. Henley, too, is concerned about the way things are going and who's behind it. After more than 6 years on the board, she wants to know why the new law that allowed a Republican takeover in Spalding County was passed when it did, and who might be pulling the strings even higher up than the state Republicans who made it happen. It was a sneak attack, she said. I think we were targeted, but I don't have the evidence of what they were doing. I think it was even higher up. I think it's more convoluted and embedded. That brings us to the end of the article, as well as the end of the show. We'll be back after this brief break to tell you what's coming up next.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, next, of course, is the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Justice Putnam will bring you his roundup of the news from around the country and around the world. What's up top here? Trump's threat at the Capitol rioters to get pardons if he wins in 2024 is third world baloney. We'll find out more about that and who said it next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.